So, okay, Joe. So, all these awesome military experiences, um, and you were probably, I think yesterday we were talking about, you were probably looking to reenlist, right? To, you were at a point, I think your one of your initial contracts or your second contract was coming to an end. You're looking to extend, but some things happened, and can you talk about that, like towards the end of your career?
Yeah. So, once again, 160th was amazing. Did five different rotations with them overseas. Really cool. Met great guys. Very good mentorship. Ted Westmoreland, I talk about him because he was just he impacted my life a lot. Respect costs nothing. He treated me like I was right on his level, and he helped me when I had questions, and he impacted my life, helped me out quite a bit. Uh, Towards the end of my time at 160th, I was down at Hunter Army Airfield at 1st Ranger Bat. We were doing darts and getting ready for another train up, and dart was downed aircraft recovery teams. And I had not a full malfunction. I had like where the chute had twisted. It kind of threw me into like oscillating. You're just spinning like a ceiling fan, and came down and broke my back uh, in three places. I was pretty injured. I end up getting taken back to Fort Campbell, get checked out. Luckily didn't need surgery. I just wore like girdles and a harness and stuff. But once the decision to leave kind of was made, and Corey Lamoureux really helped me through that process also, because you've put in all this time, you've put in all this work, now it's all over.
Yeah.
And there's some younger, better looking, smarter, faster, stronger version of you that you despise right behind you.
Yeah.
You're like, I hate this guy. It's like the Grinch when he's like loathe, right? Like you just do not like this person. There's enough rivalry between the branches, but the Army's the king of it all, right? We've got Rangers, SF, artillery, infantry, aviation. We have so much shade that we're throwing and hate for each other. It's amazing, right? But it's real, and it actually is a good thing because it creates this competition. Yeah. So what was funny is I knew that what the end was. I knew that I wasn't going to climb out of this rehabilitation and try and start, deploying again. And that was 3 years of a lot of hard work. And I'd had no experience in that. And so I just decided to leave and ETS. I didn't even want to go to the Warrior Transition Unit at the time. Like I didn't even want to militarily retire. I just decided I'm going to leave. I'm leaving.
Yeah, there was a lot of stigma though at the time with that whole Warrior Transition Unit and
PTSD, Warrior Transition. Like, what are you? You know how it was. Like now it's all puppy dogs, ice cream, and rainbows, right? Then you were an absolute piece of garbage.
So you were just doing what you could to get out of the military without people thinking that there was a problem. You were like, all right, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Hey, I'm going to go do my civilian thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
I got out and I ended up working for a company called CSC. They were teaching TCCC. It was like a $750 million contract where they built these medical simulation training centers. They built them on all the major bases. Bragg had one, Benning had one, Carson had one, Campbell had one. They were, I think, 6 or 7 initial sites where they did. And then you trained all these young soldiers that were leaving to go overseas. And so it was a really good experience. I got hired out in Fort Carson, ended up moving to Colorado. It was a fun time. We trained 8,000 soldiers. We were training literally 5,000 to 8,000 soldiers a year. And it was crazy because you're trying to figure out this corporate world, but we're still working with military every day. And it was odd because I had just left this world of being at 160th, and now I'm dealing with, fourth ID people and regular infantry and regular people. And I'm like, guys, listen to me. This is very, very important that you learn this stuff, because bad stuff is going to happen over there.
Yeah.
And it was just odd because they're young kids. So I'm thinking, was I exactly the same way? They were like, yeah, but I want to go drink.
Right.
Right. And you're like, wow, you have no idea what you're about ready to walk into. This is a bombshell. And so I worked that for several years, then ended up becoming a paramedic out there, and then went to nursing school. I thought that would be I was in medicine. I knew medicine. Horrible mistake.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely horrible. We do not fit in the civilian medical world at all. There's no place for us. Some guys have made the transition into doctors and PAs and stuff, but in my experience, then at that time, now things are different. Now they're giving you a degree for even going to the courses we went through. They didn't give us anything but a, pat on the back and good job, you're deploying, right? This was different when Dan and I especially went through, but ended up working a little bit in medicine, decided that it was the wrong thing. And a friend of mine who I was at 160th with, Nathan Hunt, got me an interview at Zeiss, and I went in and basically told them that I had no idea about the corporate world, but I was willing to work harder than anyone else to figure it out. So that's why they should hire me.
And they did.
And they did. They hired me. And
what did you do there?
we worked in optoelectronics, night vision, thermal, any magnified optic for a rifle system or weapon system, red dots, lasers. We pretty much had access to everything. We even built submarine periscopes.
Wow.
Because they were a optics house. It was in Wetzlar, Germany. It was where most of the optics were designed back in the day.
Wow.
But that's something, the three of us, right? We all were in soft medicine, transitioned out, and none of us are in medicine, right? Like I have friends that I went through the medical course with, and they're now, doctors or nurse practitioners or, some level of medicine. And one is a surgeon, and he specifically tells me, like, don't get into medicine. he hates it, right? But he's stuck because now he's, a fourth year resident, right? So like there's no turning back. He has to go make some money and pay off his student loans. But when I got out, that was sort of the initial plan, right? Like, okay, well, I'm an 18 Delta. I will do medicine now, right? And the first I got out, and we did this big long motorcycle trip, and we went to my buddy's house in Oregon, and his mom was a nurse practitioner, his dad was a doctor, and she's like, I don't even know what an 18 Delta is. That was like the big realization for me at the time. I was like,
how do you not know
how do you not know? Like, we're so cool.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so full of myself. I'm an 18 Delta. Like, how you...
Yeah, because you're the pinnacle of enlisted medicine.
Like, you're a nurse. Like, you peasants, right? Like, I'm an 18 Delta,
yeah.
right? Like, but that was a realization for me at the time. I was like, okay, like, and I tried to go back to school and do, advanced biology courses and all that stuff, and I couldn't do it. Not that I wasn't smart enough, or I just couldn't apply myself to that sort of thing. So it's interesting, you sort of transitioned out, you went back, you taught medicine for a while, right? I think that's sort of you talk to a lot of guys that get out of the military, they find something close to what they did in the military, so government contracts or whatnot, but then at some point they move on.
Yeah.
Right. And so at this job, are you doing sales or business? What was sort of your role in that, in the optics space?
It was sales and quite a bit of business development. Really probably more business development than sales at that initial job. We were chasing military contracts, but it wasn't just US, it was pretty much around the world. Like we could have access to anything that we wanted, or, you know, different people. We sold stuff to, you know, the Saudi Royal Guard. You know, we sold stuff to the US military. We sold stuff to German military. Like it was, you know, a whole process.
But like and so, I mean, we don't learn sales or business development skills in SOCM, right? Like how did you, what were your failures and what lessons, did you get mentorship in that space, or you just had to figure it out? Like,
you always have to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, it's very rare that you're going to have somebody really take you under their wing, but it's really just figuring it out and then utilizing all the stuff that, like you just said, like you're like, I'm an 18 Delta, right? Nurses and doctors should know what an 18 Delta is. That's the sad part, because they spent $1 million training you.
Yeah.
And now these guys who can operate in really, you know, insane environments, they've lost all that knowledge. They've lost all that medical capability because they don't have a track for you to go become an RN when you've done more than, you know, most of those people have done, and in an environment that is not in a hospital, right?
well, I think that's part of the gap, right?
Yeah.
It gets done right in hospitals now because everything is based on insurance policies and who's paying for it, where the government spent $1 million to train you to save someone's life, and they didn't care as long as you got that other person back because they had spent $1 million training that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like we said, like you cannot just create this level of soldiers instantaneously. It does not happen, right? You have to train them over time, and it takes time to create them. So they train a highly trained medic to go make sure that they get their, you know, product back.
Yeah. I mean, you look at medicine now, and of course there's all kinds of stuff in the news about the nurses, what was it, in Tennessee that got convicted of, of manslaughter and murder, and, you know, the whole hospital. I think that's part of what turned me off, is I didn't want to work in a hospital.
Yes.
Right? Like I didn't want that level of scrutiny and systemization, and like you could never really treat a patient. You just had to treat based on the guidelines, or, you know, there was just you couldn't do what we did.
It's an indoor environment. Yeah. You're having to chart. You're following all these protocols. You feel, like this is one of the crazy things. Even though we weren't on a schedule, well, we may have been on a schedule, but something happened with someone. They were flying and they had to go home. So then they end up sending you out to range 29, or they send you to fly with this other crew the next night, right? So you go in, you do sick call, you take care of all the guys that are coming in, and they're like, oh, hey, Joe, hey, Dan, you got to go fly this thing, or you've got to go out to the range tonight. You got to do, and even though it's not something we really want to do because it's, you know, it's a BS training mission or whatever, you aren't stuck in this office, you aren't stuck inside of a building, you're always doing something, and you're learning and growing, and there's this level of awareness and responsibility that you have to have. And then you realize once that's over, you get to go sit in an office, you get to work in a clinic, you get to work in a ward, and what we've experienced that makes us thrive, it's gone.
Yeah. No, I mean,
think about this. It's funny. I recognized this a long time ago. I don't care if it's General Hospital, ER, MASH, you know, how many TV shows have they made about working in a hospital, even military ones, right? They're always filled with drama, and that's what we didn't want, right? That was the issue. The issue is you wanted to be with a team of people that you trusted, that you were there with, and you didn't want to deal with the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
And you wanted to do it in the field, and you literally were taking on way more responsibility, right? Because there's not just pick up the phone, you know? Like, what were flight times in Afghanistan for a trauma patient?
Oh, they were a lot longer than Iraq, that's for sure.
Okay, well, they were long in Iraq, right? How
Yeah.
long are they in the U.S.? I mean, come on, let's be honest. Like,
Yeah, I mean, like even outside of Campbell down to Vandy, how many minutes is that? Is that a
13 minutes.
yeah?
In a Blackhawk, like the Blackhawk will get there in, as fast. That, I mean, we don't see dead bodies laying on the road for 3 days here,
Yeah.
right? We don't like. I mean, in OIF 1, I saw dead bodies on the road for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? There was no ambulance to come pick them up. There was no infrastructure that, was set up over there. Like, and people in America have no idea about that. They don't know. So for medicine, yeah, it was different. We that's when I knew like it was all over.
Yeah.
I tried to hang on a little bit and I taught it, and then I worked as an EMT, but then, I've got people spitting in my face, or as a paramedic and stuff, I've got people spitting at me because they want Oxycontin. And I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next thing. So that's where the business world, I worked hard to get into it. And then once you're in it, you have to figure it out. Just like you had to figure out everything in the military,
Mhm.
right? Just like people that go to college have to figure out, what they're going to be when they grow up in college, or what their job is going to be. So that was it. It was like getting out and going into the civilian world. I really had to buckle down even more so than the Army, because no one cares about me,
Mhm.
right? I don't have this support network where I can go to a E5 or an E6 or an E7 or a sergeant major or a captain and say, hey man, can you help me out? Right? No, it's not there.
Yeah. Well, did you find that as like part of the thrill, part of the new thrill, like the challenge, like, because we're three of us are all now sort of in sales or business development roles, right? And it's how did we end up here? And it's kind of the sense of, with medicine, you're always learning something new, you're always bettering yourself, you're always trying to have an advantage of something that you can't expect in the future. And I think maybe part of that in the sales business development role is like you always want to be continuing to get better.
Yeah.
You want to be learning something new, or how do you figure out another way of influence, or understanding a product better, or
And you live and die on that performance.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can either be really successful if you put everything into it, have the discipline you need to have, or you aren't going to figure it out, and you're going to be the guy that isn't successful at all. But we have that opportunity, that background. We were talking yesterday a little bit about education and how a lot of us, it's kind of a trap, and you almost got into it when you were doing the nursing program, but it's this trap where we have the GI Bill, and we say, okay, this is a benefit. And the old GI Bill, we used to have to pay money in. Our first year, we had to pay $100 every month, and as an E1, $100 every month is that was a lot of money. So you're paying that in, and then you feel obligated to get a degree because that's a benefit. I've got to take advantage of my benefits. And so sometimes you're doing that even though you have your skill set and you can apply that in the business world instead of going back and going to college, because what's college going to do for you in particular realms? Like, sure, if you're going to go be some sort of a professional, whether it's a lawyer or a medical provider or whatever, you're going to have that that degree. But we're kind of put into this trap of that benefits there, and our military culture says, oh, you need to use that benefit.
Yeah. Well, probably not only that, right? But it's our entire American society has put this significant value in undergraduate education or graduate education, right? Because now they can just extend it out farther and get more tuition money over a couple more years, right? But so you take a SOF veteran, right? And they've got all this experience and skills learned through deployments and through training and all those things. And then they transition out, and you're like, well, if you pair that SOF experience with a degree, well, somehow now you're a vice president, right?
Yeah.
Like now you've got the perfect combination, right? At least it feels like that's a product that's being sold, right? Is marry your education with the SOF experience. Now everybody's an MBA and a Green Beret, or like
Yeah, you see that a lot.
Combinations, right?
Yeah,
and it's also, I think, some folks that transition out are kind of hit in the face a little bit when they're like, "That's great, you got this experience, you've got the education, but hey, you don't just slide into a VP role, right? Like you got to go be the new guy again, right? Like
yeah,
like you got to learn the new language."
Well, and that's it. It's all personal relationships is how I kind of look at sales, business development, and climbing that corporate ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to build those personal relationships and have those people connect with you, whether they were or were not in the Army or the military or, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard. It doesn't matter. You still have to be able to build those relationships. And I always feel like the military taught me that, especially in SOF, more than anything else, because you were working with so many different people, you were doing so many different operations, I mean, from loading up helicopters and flying them on C-17s and dropping them off and unloading them and putting them, quote unquote, back together and then flying a mission that same night. People don't know about that, right? We can't get baby formula.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these people are clowns.
Yeah.
They have big red floppy shoes and a honky nose. I mean, it's
well, I mean, it's one of the soft truths, right? Where you have to have support. Right?
Yes,
and you have to interact with those folks to make things happen. There's going to be changes to the plan. You have to find ways and build relationships with people that can accommodate the change to the plan, right? Or accelerate the timeline, or get extra supplies, or whatever the case may be. You have to build relationships, and that's probably been a huge part of your success now with your current company, right? I mean, you're in a role. I mean, aren't you vice president of business development?
I wish that was the case. No, like you said, you start at the bottom and climb back up to the top, right?
Yeah.
Now I, work for Beretta. It's been an amazing job. I love it. I was always a huge fan of pretty much all of their weapons, and it's been awesome. But I started in sales and really had to beat feet. I mean, I took care of Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi, and being from the North, that was even more challenging, right? Because if I'm not rooting for Ole Miss or, Vandy or University of Tennessee or Alabama or Auburn, as soon as you walk into a gun store or start dealing with buyers, you'll see it on their desk, right? So that's the thing. I would just always be aware of your surroundings, right? Stay alert, stay alive, improvise, adapt, overcome. I mean, there were some times when I'd walk in to deal with people and they'd be like, "Who you root for?" And I'd see Tennessee there and I'd be like, "Tennessee."
You're being the
Right.
chameleon.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? They'd be like, "What? You love Tennessee?" I'm like, "They're the best. I love them. Love everything about them." Right? Drive 8 hours down the road because I got to go to another big dealer. He's an Auburn guy, right? "Who do you love?" "I love Auburn. They're the best."
Yeah.
Right? So it was that, right? I'm not there to create conflict. I'm there to sell guns for Beretta, right? I'm there to sell weapons for Beretta. I'm there to make Franco Beretta money. You can give me whatever job title you want, but my job is to be a valuable asset for the company, right? And make them money. And hopefully along the way, I'm maintaining who I am as a person, integrity, we're building good stuff. So me at Beretta, that's great because we build very good products. So it's not like I'm going in and trying to sell them something that is subpar or dangerous or bad. I'm selling them something that they should want to buy. That's very high quality. This is a company that's been around for almost 500 years. We'll be having our anniversary really soon, which was funny too, because when I got hired, I didn't have a sales background. Again, they gave me an opportunity and I excelled in it. And that's when, year and a half, 2 years ago, they said, hey, would you want to do business development? Because and that's why I always laugh about the weapon expert things. I'm not an expert. I just have a broad knowledge of a lot of stuff. Right. And that comes from being a medic. Right. We're not specialists. An 18 Delta is not a specialist, but a little bit about everything, a jack of all trades, right? And as a medic, you also have to know how to use the weapon system, and you have to know how to use the night vision, and you have to know how to use all the little medical equipment that's always brand new coming out too. New catheters, new IV bag, new, pump set, new tourniquets, new whatever. So I felt like this was a perfect fit for me because I got to play with trinkets, right? New things that came out. And that's military guys in general. Medics especially, but military guys in general, they want more education whether or not they know it. They just don't want to have to go sit in a class and do it. Right. That was the problem at nursing school. I went there and I had nurses, nursing instructors that were teaching me stuff, and I knew they didn't know what they were talking about.
Right.
It's not my job to try and bust them out or make them feel bad or talk down to them. But I just knew that a lot of them had not had experience in the cardiovascular world or in the trauma world, right? They might have been just a standard, OB nurse.
Yeah.
Phenomenal job. We need them. But it was just funny because then you come in to teach and you could just tell they were teaching something they didn't know.
Yeah.
So I kind of used a lot of that too in my sales and my business development of how we interact with people, how we treat people. I don't care who you are. If you're a private and a guy is a, high ranking guy, E5, E6, E7, sergeant major, and you're a private, you're going to treat that guy like he's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
Right? You're taught that. It's a respect thing. Right? And so that's what I've realized in the business world. The number one thing you can do is respect people and listen to what they have to say and not create any extra conflict that doesn't need to be there, because it's not going to do you any good in sales, and it's definitely not going to do you any good in the business development world, because our job is to develop the business to make money, right? Nobody's like, hey, let's build this business and lose a bunch of money. Right? I think there's only one company out there.
There's a few, right?
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think only Rolex is, and I can't afford them. Right. I work for Beretta, but I think Rolex is one of the only companies out there that really is designed not to make money, because it is a brand. It's an absolute brand, right? Like Beretta is a brand, and it's a brand everyone knows, and it is an absolutely global brand, but they still want to make money, right? That's the purpose of owning it, because they have to pay all these employees, and we have insurance, and we have 401ks, and we have vehicles, and we have gas, and we have, production, and we have travel. We're going to shows, like we're getting ready for NRA.
Yeah.
It's a big show. It costs a lot of money to do that. People don't realize that.
Yeah, but I mean, what you had said, right? Like, respect is free, right? And we talked about this yesterday, right? Like, there's a basic formula to build relationships, and essentially sales is relationships, right? People do business with you, right? And ultimately they're doing business with Beretta, but they're doing it because of you, right? Or continuing it because of you, right? Those are your relationships. So it's, respect, listen, and that's part of respect. Focus on the relationship and not on the sale. Like, those are basic principles that, in any business development role, right? But something like, you have to learn that, right? Like, you have to figure out, you did a lot of these things in the military without realizing it. How do you translate that? How do you reach back into that bucket of skill sets and pull it out and say, I'm going to rebrand this skill as now it's sales and business development, right? It's that reintegration process of, I guess, being flexible and humble to restart and go in that direction. I mean, you were telling me a story yesterday, a couple stories, but one was sort of like, your influence, right? And you're in some of these meetings with the other folks in Beretta and in leadership positions, and we get fed this information from leadership coaches, right? Like that's a whole industry now, right? And how to lead people, and write a book, and you can go pay a bunch of money, listen to a speaker, teach you how to lead, right? And you were explaining to me in this meeting that while you're not you're not high ranking in a lot of ways, right? Like these other people in parallel positions or in positions above you, when you speak, they all shut up and listen, right? And that's a funny thing, right? Because you're not outranking them. You're actually you've built enough relationships with these folks, and they recognize your experience and your expertise that they want to shut up and hear what you have to say. Like that's influence, right?
But it goes back to your honesty, though. Because I think one of the things that everybody that's worked with you, it's Joe's a straight shooter. He shoots straight on everything, and he tells you, hey, this is what is up, or this is what is down. And even in these meetings that you go to, what do? You don't tell them what they want to hear, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said yesterday, right? You give respect, you tell the truth, and you be authentic. Like those are all free things.
It's so simple. It was bringing it even back really just because of like the Mike Durant thing. They're like, he's anti-2A, he's anti-gun. No, he's not.
Right.
Okay, so the people that are saying that took something out of context, and they're utilizing it to try and smear his name. Right? That's never really, I've never just been about that. I don't understand why people get caught up in it. I don't understand why people think that it's okay to do that, because you wouldn't do it to their face, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I think it's just a difference of how you were raised. Like one of my favorite sayings from the Army that I was taught at a young age, especially at like Ranger Battalion, is if you want to talk like a man, you're going to get treated like a man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it was, well, I better, like, if I'm saying something, I better be able to stand this ground and defend it. Right. And that might even be a physical thing. Right. Or it might be an intellectual thing, but I better be able to defend it. Right. And that's that the military taught me that, the military taught me that I should do these things, and I should be honest about stuff, and I should tell people the truth, because even if they don't like the truth, they hate being lied to.
Yeah.
Right? American public hates the truth, but what does the American public hate more than anything? Being lied to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? It's so simple, but we always have to overcomplicate things because it's what you said. You graduate, now you need a master's. Now you need a doctorate. Now you need this. This is going to prove that you're smarter than everyone else. Well, does it? I don't know. Right? Because it doesn't look like it does. It doesn't, it really has to be based on like your integrity and how you come across, and that's it. It's not like everyone shuts up because I'm talking, because I'm like running the show. They're listening because I have always told them the truth, or I've always told them my honest opinion. And it's not just my opinion. It's an opinion that I've had because I've done research and I've looked into it, which stems back from medical stuff, right? In medicine, you're not allowed to just say something stupid, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this guy has a tension pneumothorax. Does he? Right? You don't just, like, people love throwing out terms all the time, right? But it's like, if I state that to a doctor and it comes back that this guy doesn't have that stuff, he's probably going to call me on it. So I better do the correct assessment that when I drop the patient off, this guy has got a good report and he knows what's going on, right?
Yeah, it's that truth that we find on the trauma lanes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you listen, you just like, that's one of my favorite things. I don't care who you are or what you've done. There's truth in trauma lanes.
Yeah.
All right. Like, you want to talk about holding yourself to like a standard. People don't know about that.
Yeah.
People don't know about people being violently blown up. People don't know about IEDs. People don't know about that life. Then they don't want to know. Because if they did, they'd care more about veterans, right?
Yeah.
They'd care more about organizations, and they wouldn't create a veterans organization that's actually siphoning off money for themselves or whatever it is, right? Or being not being truthful. Like, people don't want to know that life. That's why medics, to me, it's why doctors and nurses are always considered, that higher level of holding themselves to a standard and more honest than everyone else. But I'll tell you what, that's the thing. When you're an infantry line medic or you're, special operations medic, and you're there in the, combat situation and you're taking care of a guy, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
That's where did you do the training that was correct to make yourself successful in this situation?
Yeah.
Right? We all partied in the Army. We all acted like idiots, right? We all spent our whole entire paycheck in one, weekend at Cat West.
Right.
It happened.
Right.
All right. I get it. But the funny thing is did I also burn the midnight oil? So then when I deployed, I didn't end up with blood on my hands.
Yeah.
And having that PTSD of, did I do the right thing? Right. I can honestly say I didn't have that, especially at 160th, because they spent the money for us to train. They spent the money so we had the equipment that we needed to be successful, and they held your feet to the fire because, remember, the people that we were working with and for, I learned so much from them because the people we were working with and for could technically fire you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, you have one of the customers call up.
I mean, people like it, just because you were an Army medic or just because you were a special operations medic at 160th, especially, if you weren't cutting the mustard, you were gone.
Yeah.
People don't think you can be fired from a job in the Army. That's not true. And it's definitely not true where, Dan and I came from, and, and Nathan Hunt, my buddy, like, if you weren't shit hot, they say, right, then you were politely asked to leave.
Yeah.
And that was, you can't imagine that amount of embarrassment, and that was something that would either like really push guys to become better, or they would just break, and who knows what they're doing now. They're drinking.
Right.
Well, and you said something yesterday, and we're getting to the capstone here of the Joe King Business School on this podcast. And you said this yesterday, and I might butcher it a little bit, but you're like, let your uniform do the talking, right? Like, let your accolades, the things you've accomplished, those things, like, wear them, but don't talk about them, right? Like, your legend builds based off of other people and their experiences with you, right? And that goes back to sort of like this level of influence, right? We live in a world where everybody wants to be a quote unquote influencer, right? But haven't done anything to earn it, right? And so this story that you told me yesterday, and I'm going to put you on the spot to talk about it, but it was your Finland experience, right? And how you kind of came back from that, and from that one experience, you had built this sort of legendary status with some folks, and you had walked into an event, and everybody kind of, stood up and welcomed you with open arms. The level of influence from that one experience, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Well, it's ridiculous and it's stupid, but it is knowing your audience and where you're at, right? It's the let's not get into a football argument about who likes who when we're trying to do business and sales, right? So when we go to Finland, in Finland, they get undressed and go into saunas and drink vodka and then they go outside in the absolute freezing cold and jump into ice water.
Right.
They don't do that in northeastern Ohio. What?
They do it. They do it in northeastern Ohio, and they do it in other places. But this is like really part of the culture, right? And it's almost like a test. So it was just funny because myself and a guy that worked at Beretta, he's our rifle product manager, Seth, amazing guy. He's an amputee. We went over there, and everybody's like, "Are you guys going to do this?" I'd never do that. And Seth and I were like, 100%. Like, if the Finns want to see us drunk and naked, we will make it happen for them, right? So, and it's funny because that was it. Like, it's not about that for them, but as Americans, we're like, what? We're going to go drink with dudes naked in a sauna and then go jump into ice water? That literally sounds like two of the things I would not do ever.
Right.
But I mean, we went in full force. I mean, we went in like they were impressed. Let's just put it that way. Right. So not only did we do it once, we did it several times, really to drive the point home that we were on board, right? Like, we're on board, we're part of the team. So that was always, you know, and like I said, yeah, I ended up later on, went to an event. Well, like all the Finns, all the people, you know, everybody was like excited because I showed up because we had built that real bond there, right? We had built that relationship. This is something that they do. They don't do it in the U.S. So when we went there, we're going to do what they want to do, you know?
Yeah.
They also do driven hunts, different than I've ever seen a driven hunt done. And it was super fun, you know, because it's just a culture thing. But remember, businesses have cultures, states have cultures, right?
Yeah.
The United States is exactly that, the United States.
Right.
They're all different. That's what I'm saying. I joined the Army. I did not understand that people could live in New York City and be 27 years old and not have a driver's license. That would never be something I'd have thought of as a child, right? Or I mean, as a kid. In Ohio, you turn, 15, you're starting your process. You get your driver's license. I mean, you're Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. Like, you got a golden ticket.
Yeah.
You're working to buy a car because it gave you this freedom,
Yeah. But
and that was it, just building those relationships of, okay, this is what they do there, this is how it's done, we're going to go all in to make sure that when we're talking and when we want to give them advice, right? You don't tell people what to do, you give advice. People are either going to take it or they won't.
Well, and it goes back to respect, right? You were showing those folks respect by honoring their traditions, right? And
it's understanding that culture.
Yeah.
Like taking the time to understand that culture and then apply your experience to that culture in the best way possible.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you even said at this point, like some other folks in Beretta, like they have a hard time getting a hold of folks in Finland, but they'll always answer your emails, right? That's the level of influence of just the basics of showing respect.
Well, and that's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's part of it. Like I said, when you're going into the business world, the best thing you can do is to figure out what that business is like, what the business culture is there, right? And does it fit for you? Is it do you want to be part of that business? It's funny because everyone thinks that during a job interview, you're being interviewed. You're interviewing these people also, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think people forget about that, and especially military guys, because you go join the military, right? Like, you're like, oh, pick me, I'll go. You take a couple tests, do a couple things. If you can, spell your name correctly, you can get in.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a social security number, you can get in. Like, you got a birthday, you can get in. So that's the thing. It's like in the business world, you really want to look and see, is this a company that I want to work for, or is this company a pirate ship and I don't want to be I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So I think guys really forget that too. Like, especially SOF, you do have a lot to bring to the table. You have a lot of experience. You have put yourself out there even more to accomplish things and try and, do the greater good, I guess. But that's it. It's like, you have to know that, and let them know that you are going to bring more than just that. You know, I don't want to, nobody, where the rubber meets the road, especially in the corporate world, nobody wants to hear about war stories. They don't. They want to hear funny stories, right? Because everybody wants to hear funny stories, right? But nobody wants to hear your, you know, bitch, gripes, and complaints. Nobody wants to hear about death and destruction, right? They don't. They really don't.
Yeah.
They do at the movies, but they actually pay for that, right? But when you're in a company, they don't care about that. They care about, are you going to perform, and are you going to, you know, show up to work every day, and are you going to be an asset, and are you going to make the company money, right? And it's like, you did all those things in the military, you just didn't know you were doing them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, all right, Joe. So we are coming to an end here. So do you have, you kind of summarized a lot of stuff right there, but do you have anything you want to leave as, you know, after SOF? This is the podcast, after SOF, like lessons learned, something you would have told yourself as you were, you know, post-military career. What is Joe King's, you know, lesson learned or point of advice for after SOF?
The advice that I could go back and give myself, and I didn't necessarily fall into the trap, but, you know, in the military, they build you up, you know, you have this real, like, you know, good idea about yourself, you know, whether it's arrogance or whatever, you know, it's, you're better than civilians, you're better than everyone else because of what you've done. And that could be true. Right? But you have to come out and absolutely be prepared for a full reset. You know, I'm 42, so I remember when Nintendos were there, when shit wasn't going your way, boing, I hit the reset button, I could start Mario all over again, right? It was awesome. Right. I just reset it, no big deal. But it's almost the same thing when you come out. You have to take the skills that you've learned, and you need to look at how to put those into action when you're applying, when you're talking to people, when you're interacting with people. You know, you don't want to be a disgruntled vet, even if you are. You know, nobody wants to hire that. They want to hire a energetic person that is fun to be around, that works hard, and that brings value, right? It really is. They have all these big conventions and shows, and that is the thing. It doesn't matter if it's the computer world, the car world, the gun world, you know, bow world, rims, tires, off-roading, it doesn't matter. They're all exactly the same. I'm positive they have, you know, conventions or shows about real estate, right? And business.
Right.
Nobody wants to be there with the drunk idiot who's telling, you know, ridiculous stories, or, you know, you really have to find that quiet professionalism and really center yourself and bring that to the company that you're trying to go to, that you're going to add value to them. Everybody wants value added, right? We're not all Michael Jordan, right? We're not.
Yeah.
So if you're not, what value can I add to be there, to at least be on their team, right? To at least, you know, I'm not Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to the guy, right? And I don't even want a job. I just want to hear more of what he has to say when cameras are off, because he's a pretty smart guy. I want to listen to anybody who has a high net wealth and that is made it in business, whether they're military or not, because that's what we learned, right? Listen to what people say, take in all the information, and then you'll figure out what to do with it, right? But if you're doing a lot of the talking,
Yeah.
you got to listen, man. You got to have that respect to listen and ask those questions. Where is this company going? Where do they see themselves, right? because you know that you're going to be able to bring value and you're going to be able to add value to that because of your experiences, whether you have a degree or not. That doesn't really matter at this point, right?
Yeah.
I look at it as you're almost like a journeyman. You know, back in the day, like when you were a machinist or a carpenter or pipe fitter, you know, all the trades, they had journeymen. That means you were trained enough that you could go out to California and build a pipe system or machine something. And, you know, because you had been trained enough, so you were a journeyman. I really look at that as like, especially soft, is you better be a journeyman, right? You better be able to walk into any situation and really be able to handle it. Whether you're dealing with a dignitary from a foreign nation, or you're talking to the guy who drives the forklift, right? You have to find common ground with all those people, and then you have to be able to relate to them. And you should know that because you were a private at one time, right? And you had to earn your rank and you had to do the things necessary to grow your military career. It's the same thing. It's just figuring it out in a business world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really all I've done is try and just be myself, you know, be honest, truthful, and say, hey, I'm here to work.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah. It's like know your role and add value, right? Simple
Yeah.
basics of being a good teammate, right?
Be there.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not the VP, but I want to talk to him. I want to find out what he knows. I want him to give me advice and criticism, you know, constructive criticism, you know, like those are all things that are vitally important, especially in the business world, because that guy's there for a reason. Whether or not it's a good reason, doesn't matter. He's got it, right? He's already got the title.
No, it's been awesome, man. Thanks, Joe, for being on this and for connecting. I mean, your energy and your personality are pretty addictive. So you and Matt Lambden, man, I need you guys more in my life. So this has been pretty awesome for me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you guys for having me. It's been awesome.
Hey, thanks, brother. It's been good talking with you again.
Yep. So this is it. AfterSOF signing off.